All right. So today we are going to discuss or understand how an approval process in Salesforce can be configured. What is approval process and why it is used, or under what business context this can be used. Okay, so let's try to understand the context which is outlined under Travel Approval app, and then we'll try to open up the discussion. So just to be specific, right, let's read it out. Salesforce includes built-in approval process capabilities. So it has its own standard approval process, and this is one of the plus point or pros or benefits which is given from Salesforce side. No other application, may have, uh, at least I'm not aware of, but this is what which is kind of a very good features on Salesforce platform. So this approval process is an automated process, simply point and click automate. It's one of the point and click automation tools. So which where you can use this to approve records in the Salesforce. An approval process specify the criteria a record must meet. Okay, so any record in the system which has to go through an approval process has to meet certain predefined criteria before it can be actually submitted for approval process. And once it goes into approval process, there may be single step or multiple steps within the approval process, right? If it satisfies certain criteria at step one, what should happen, right? Who is the approver? Are you going to do any field update, send an email alert, or create some kind of task, or send a message to the external system? So that kind of action can be configured at each step of the approval process. And what happens when the record completely comes out of the approval process, right? It can be either rejected or approved. So based on that, you can take another, you can define necessary actions like field update, email alert, outbound message to the external system, or even creating a task for your internal business people. Okay. So before we go into the context of this travel approval app, there is a note which I have prepared. And let's go through that one. Like we discussed, it's an automated process. Okay, Sitara is joining. As Sitara, so we have just started the approval process, and we are going through the theory part of it. So welcome. So we were discussing that approval process is one of the point and click automation tools which your company or your business process can use to approve records in Salesforce. So your application may be around any business domain, right? And in any business process, approving something is one of the part of your business process, right? Let's say you are your application is built on Salesforce, and that application is basically what? Leave management application, or travel approval expense management application, right? Even giving discount to your customers, right? Your internal agents, right? Who are running your service desk for your customers, right? Who are providing services to your to the services or products which has been purchased by your customers. So even the service agent which is directly interacting with your customers, they are also entitled to give some kind of discount, right? If they are selling something, okay, or providing services. But based on the different levels of the service agent, right? Let's say service agent is a junior service agent, right? There may be senior or a lead service agent kind of people, right? So based on the person who is dealing with your customers, every person may be entitled to give certain amount of discount, right? Like all users, all agent within your company can provide, let's say, 10% discount on the product if the customer is trying to negotiate, right? But beyond that, it may not be within their privilege to provide more than 10% kind of discount. So in that case, if the person is going to, let's say, provide 12%, 50%, or whatever which is beyond their range, what can be done in that business process is that an approval process can be configured, and if the person who is providing more than the amount or the discount which is beyond their limit, that has to go through approval process. So that kind of business context where you need some kind of approval for, let's say, providing discount to your customers, approving leaves for your employees, um, approving the expenses for your business trips. Such kind of applications can be or business process can use this approval process in Salesforce. So that was about the business context under which we can use. So in exam as well, and also in the interview question, right? If they ask, if you get something like something has to be approved in order to do something, right? So always, I mean, the first preference is always to go for the approval process, unless there is some other complex business, context within it, which cannot be done through point and click automation tool. But certainly you have other, capability from Salesforce side, the coding capability as well, where you can use or where you can deal with the complex business process. Okay, but you got the point that under which business context you can use and why you need to use this. Okay, now in terms of the different the pieces or constituents of approval process, these are more or less the high level of you need three different information to configure an approval process. Okay, first one is the 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 criteria which a record. That record may be your travel approval request, that record may be your leave request, or that record may be your discount record. Okay, so if that record satisfies certain kind of criteria, okay, then that record has to go into approval process. So that initial criteria is called like initial submission criteria, which will allow the record to go into approval process. Otherwise there is no need of approval process, right? You may not want every record to go into approval process, right? Otherwise it will flood the person who is approving the record, right? So you give certain privileges to your ground workers, like if they are providing discount to your customers, right? So you provide, as a business, you provide like, yes, they can provide 10%, up to 10% of discount, and there is no approval required at all, right? So in that case there may not be approval process. But if something which is beyond uh, the approval limit of the person who is directly interacting with the customers, certainly you may want to delegate or ask for approval from your higher management people, right? The person who you are reporting to, or the person or the team which basically deals with the discount approval, or the person or the HR team which deals with the leave management, right? Or yeah, so that kind of context, if there is a necessity of approval, you will firstly, that record has to satisfy the initial submission criteria. Now if it satisfies, it goes into the approval queue. Okay, we'll see that structure in Salesforce platform. But yeah, so once it goes into the approval queue, right, then you define the steps. Now your approval process can be either single step or it can be of multi-step, right? Once it is approved at step 1, then it goes to step 2, and then so on, depending upon your business process, right? Your business may ask for just like one approval step, right? Some of the business process may ask for 2, 3, or 4, and so on. Okay. So that's about the single or multiple steps which you configure in the approval process. And then you also identify who is going to approve, right? There is no rocket science, just common sense. If something has to be approved, that something has to satisfy the initial criteria, and then that something has to go through certain steps. And there are certain people or user or team which is sitting to approve those records which required some kind of approval, right? So basically there are three, primary entities or information which you need to create an approval process. Certainly there are other attributes or behaviors which you would like to uh, incorporate to make it more flexible. That's a part of the setup which we'll go through in some time. Okay, sounds clear, Roshan? Yeah, say it again, please.
Yes, not.
The business context, you got it, right? Why we need this.
Yes, I got it.
Okay. Now, do you understand this, like from a layman's terms, right? If you have to approve something, just consider about leave management, right? You in your if you go to you are in an IT company, right? Then you certainly raise a approval leave request in some kind of application, and that leave request goes to your line manager, right? The manager may approve or decline, right? So if so the record which you are submitting for approval, that has to satisfy some entry criteria,
Criteria.
right?
And if the
You,
criteria,
yeah, and if it
and if the
satisfies the
criteria
criteria, yeah,
then it will automatically process the report.
no, it will go into the approval process. Now within the approval, it may go for like there may be one step approval required, or there may be like 2% has to approve, right? Or maybe 3% has to approve this record. So there may be 3 steps, let's say, right? First level approval, second level approval, third level approval, right? That kind of levels can be, there in some of the business process or approval process which you configure. And now at each step, they may be either accepted or rejected, right? So who is going to accept or reject, right? It's either a user or a queue which is dealing with that kind of record, right? So once they are approved,
Yes.
then it will come out of approval process either as approved or rejected, right? Right. Now, so we'll see in the configurations how it is done, and through the example which is there in the Trailhead. Okay. So next step is like, now a step can be, approval step can apply all the records, included in the process. Either you can send all the records to the approval process, or you can filter, right? Like I was saying, you may not want, sometimes you may not want all the records to go into the approval process. And the business use case which I talked about is discount management application, right? So you are the CEO of a company, okay? And you may not be dealing with with the customers, right, on day-to-day basis. It's your service desk or your service center which will be dealing with your customers, right? So service team may have different levels of people, right? Some may be junior, some may be expert and senior, and some may have more authority, right? So the first level of the people who is directly interacting with the customers, they may be entitled to give certain level of discount, and if something is more than their limit, then it has to go through approval process, that kind of thing. We'll talk about that. Okay, so an approval process also specifies the action to take when a record is approved, rejected, recalled. Okay, so either a record can be approved or rejected, or the submitter may, you are submitting a record for approval, right? So you may even, like, sometimes you may recall the record from the approval process. So recalling feature is also there in approval process. We'll see that one. Now, what actions you can configure in approval process? Like either you may want to send an email alert to your customers, to the person who is going to approve as well, right? Or you may want to do some kind of field update, right? If it is approved by this person, then change the status to approved, that kind of behavior. Or maybe if it goes into the approval process, you may want to send a message to some external system. Okay, let's say your customer data is in Salesforce, right? But your discount application is in some other application, let's say SAP is again a different application. So from Salesforce, you may want to send the data to the SAP. The SAP will validate the data and then send the response back. Okay. So that kind of, if you wanted to send a message to the external system during the approval process, you can even configure actions like outbound message. Or you can create a task, let's say like a task for your internal team or some user, like do something for this record, right? To do kind of actions you can create. So theoretically, you got an idea, right? What kind of actions you can create in approval process, and this will be, these are asked in interview and as well as in exam as well. So what kind of action that can be configured through the approval process? Okay, so you have to keep in mind these 4 types of actions. Now there is something called recall feature, and it can be used by the person who is submitting the record into the approval process. Okay, just to recall the process. Let's say I submitted this record for approval process, but later I realized that I need to, I should have provided some more information, or maybe you wrongly submitted it for approval process. So you would like to, recall it from the process. Okay. All right, so let's go into the Trailhead and try to understand the context. Okay, so in this section, we will create an approval process for our travel approval request that has to follow. Okay, if you try to recall the data model, we have department on the top of the object hierarchy, then we have travel approvals, and then we have expense item. Okay, so we are trying to create an approval process for travel approval record in the system in our travel approval app, and we'll use the following logic, like all travel approval are sent to employees direct manager for approval. Okay, like you are raising a travel approval request in the system in this travel approval app, right? So once it is raised, and let's say I'm your manager, remember your user account. If you go to your user account, let's say I'm going to my user account, you will see a manager lookup on the user. See your manager. Okay, edit it. Okay, so in your Salesforce org, right, it's my business is running, and all the people or different teams which are supporting my business, right, or which are supporting my customers, their users are also created in this org, right? And then in the org, the hierarchy will be maintained, right? Who is reporting to whom, right? So you are a user in this org, and let's say on your user account, I'm configured as a manager. Okay, so as soon as you raise a travel approval request in the org, you can submit it for approval. Okay, this will end in 10 minutes. Fine. Okay, so you will raise a travel approval request, right? And once you submit it, it will be routed to me for an approval. Me or any user who is acting as your manager on your user profile. Okay, so once you submit it, let me go back to the Trailhead. So what should happen? Any travel approval request which is getting created in the system has to be, approved by the employee's direct manager. And if the trip is out of state, right, the approval is also sent to a travel coordinator for approval. Okay, if it is not out of state, this step is skipped. So you see that there are 2 steps, right? One is generic for all. So any request which is raised has to, go through your manager's approval. And if any specific request which may be raised by either you, me, or any other person, right, in my company, and if the out of state, remember on the travel request there is a out of state checkbox. So if a record, if a trip is outside state, then it again, I mean, it has to also go to travel coordinator, and travel coordinator may be another third person in your company. So there are two steps basically which we have to configure. One is common for all, and if it is out of state, then again then it goes to the travel coordinator for additional approval. Make sense? So this is our requirement basically. Okay, all of you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. See, it's very important for you to know what is the requirement, why that requirement is being asked. Okay. And then you know your part comes up when like how you have to do it, right? So how you have to do it, this is how we are going to do this. So you go to admin setup, okay, using this gear icon, and then you search for approval process. Okay, you will see this approval process under process automation. So if I go to the org and go to the setup here and search for approval, under process automation, I see approval process. Okay, I already have, so let me deactivate this. Okay. Now, we'll have to search. So you can write approval process on the objects which you have created in your Salesforce org. So it includes your standard objects as well, like account, cases, opportunity, right? It also includes your custom objects as well. In our case, our application is a custom application. Then we'll select our travel approval. In our case, travel approval, well is travel approval, right? This one, okay? Now click on create a new button. So you will see two options, jumpstart or use standard setup wizard. Jumpstart is like it will route you through different screens and it will ask you to do basic setup. Okay, like the name, it is named jumpstart. If you select the second option, it will like let's say there are 10 steps, and in jumpstart it will just walk you through, let's say the basic steps, like for example, let's say seven steps. So it will skip 3 steps which are optional, which you can configure later on as well. Okay, in standard setup it will walk you through all the steps. Okay, so it depends on you. So in this case, let's say you will use jumpstart. Let's understand the basic setup first, and then you can always come here and play around with additional configurations. Okay, so click on jumpstart. Okay, now it's like any other configurations which you have done, it asks for a name. So let's provide a name here, and it will automatically populate the unique name. You can change it if you like. I'm going to change it because I already have created another travel approval with the same API name. So API name is always unique, has to be unique. So I just had one in the end. Now approval assignment email template, will leave it blank for now. Like I said, we are going through the basic setup. Once we understand the purpose of it, the basic configurations of it, you can always play around with some complex or additional features around it. Okay, now specify the entry criteria. Okay, so we have two options. If you want to work with formula, you can use this merge expressions, or if you want to work with simple criteria are met, then you can search from here. So let's go with the criteria are met. And our criteria is if the expense amount is greater than 0, right? If I'm raising a travel approval request and there is no expenses, it doesn't need any approval process, right? Which makes sense. So what I will see here, travel approval colon, and then the field name. So travel, we are building the approval process on travel approval object. Remember the object which we selected? So our field, which is called total expense, and this total expense is the field name, and this one is the object name. So object name colon field name. So if total expense is greater than 0. Okay. Now select approver. So like I said, right? This is the entry criteria, the initial submission criteria. Once the record satisfies this criteria, it will be submitted for approval process. And now here we are selecting who is going to be the approver, right? So again, there are different options, but let's stick with the common one. Automatically assign an approver using standard or custom field hierarchy, which is the second option. Okay. And here we'll select like on the user object, there is this standard user field, which is called manager. Okay. You can, if there were another user lookup, a custom lookup, then that will appear under this. But since we are dealing with the standard user field, let's go with that one first. So this one we are going to use, because if you are raising a travel approval request on your user account, someone would be acting as a manager. So that person will be dynamically, become the approver. So your manager may be different, my manager may be different, right? So based on the configurations, they will be, acting as a manager for your request. Now let's just see what other options we have. If you select this one, then the person, now again, there are 4 different options. Like I'm saying, depending upon your business requirement, the request coming from your business analyst or from your product owner, the person who gives the requirement, basically, they will, you have to have a discussion with them and then understand, is the submitter going to choose the approver manually? Hello. Hello, Roshan.
Yes.
Oh, what happened? It got automatically.
Your network is weak.
Now,
Even
now,
your voice is breaking too much.
now. Hello. Now is it good?
Yes. Yes, not good.
Yes.
Hello. Okay, it is starting.
Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible now. It was breaking in between.
Okay, so if that happens, just stop me, okay?
Or anyway, I think time is
Actually,
going to up. We can rejoin or
out.
something.
I think it got started automatically. That's how it,
I can
Actually,
see
less than
remaining
1
30
minute.
seconds. Yeah.
okay. Okay, so let's join again, okay?
We have to restart the meeting again.
Okay, let's join again.
Yeah.
Thank you.